It looks like we have a good group here, so let's start with the Nokar mantra. Om Namo Arihantanam, Om Namo Siddhanam, Om Namo Ayadiyanam, Om Namo Vajayanam, Namo Loe Savasahunam, Eso Pancha Namo Karo, Salva Pavapanasano, Mangalalancha Salvesim. Paramam Have Mangalam, Paramam Have Mangalam. So last week we had the question, if I choose to go watch football instead of meditating, does that mean I believe I'm a soul less than the person that doesn't? The answer is yes. However, what I failed to mention last week was the fact that you are here now for an hour a week means you believe you're more a soul than someone that is not here right now. Also, there are some questions and, dare I say, disbelief that once you are spiritually advanced enough, not only would you leave your attachments to food, possessions, and relationships behind, you would do so with joy and with a smile on your face. Some people find that hard to comprehend. What is a life without the foods I love to eat? Why would I want to reach a state where I don't enjoy the things I love? Well, let me tell you, that's what we've been talking about for years now. That's what I've been trying to get through to you for years now. The things that you love enslave you. We are trying to get out of the cycle of love and hate, which leads to the cycle of life and death. The foods that you love enslave you. The possessions that you love enslave you. The movies, shows, and books that you love enslave you. And yes, the people that you love enslave you. And this is a very important point. So does anybody not understand this point before we go on? Great. So now that we understand, we're all at different stages of spiritual development. So that brings us to chapter 23, the 14 stages of spiritual development. The first stage is having the wrong faith. The second stage is having a taste of true faith, that you have tasted true faith once before. The third is having mixed faith, that is, you believe some true things and you believe some false things. The fifth is when you have partial renunciation. That is, you are a believer in the 5 minor vows. The sixth is, sorry, did I skip over one? The fourth is vow-less right faith. You believe the right things, but you don't take vows. The fifth is you take the 5 minor vows. The sixth is full renunciation, but you have limited awareness. That is, you've renounced the world, but you're still under some delusion. The seventh is you've renounced the world, but you're not under any delusion. The sixth is the meditative state, or the unprecedented state. Sorry, I'm getting the numbers screwed up here. We talked about 7th. The 8th is the meditative state. The 9th is the advanced meditative state. The 10th is the stage of subtle greed. That means all of your passions are gone except for a tiny amount of greed, which we know is one of the hardest to get rid of. The 11th is the suppressed passion state. That is, all of your passions are suppressed. The 12th is the passionless stage. You've gotten rid of all of your passions. Krodh, Man, Maya, Lobh especially. The 13th is the active omniscient state. And the 14th is moksha, or the omniscient state. So let's talk about each of these in turn. So the first stage on your path to spiritual development is the first, or having wrong faith. You have wrong faith because of your monia karma, or deluding karma. And the reason, this karma is called the king of all karma. And the reason that is because if you don't work on getting rid of this one, you won't get rid of anyone. The characteristic mark of the first state is unbelief in the truth. That is, you don't believe a soul exists. You don't believe there's a pathway to get rid of the soul. You don't believe any of that. So in this stage, all 28 types of deluding karma are within you. There are 28 types of Monia karma, and you have them all, and you're trying to get rid of them. So it's important to note here that the stages are not in order. They're roughly in order, but so from number 1, you don't go to number 2. And from number 2, you don't go to number 3. It's a little bit different. From number 1, you go to number 4. And from number 4, you can go to 5 or go down to 3. Once you're at 3, you can only go down to 2. You can't go up to 4. And once you're at 2, you can only go down to 1. So it's not free movement between each of the stages. So we'll talk about number 2 next. But remember, from number 1, you jump right to number 4. So number 2, you can, as I mentioned, it is you have tasted true faith, which is number 4. It's if you mess up too much on number 4 and number 3, and you increase your Monia karma from that state, and then you remember tasting true faith. You remember you believed that once, but you can't act on it. So you can only go down to number 1 from number 2. So remember that you can get rid of karma and you can attract it as well. So if you attract too much Monia karma or deluding karma back, you'll go down to number 2. Number 3 is also a transitory stage, like we said. It is the mixed state of belief. You believe some true things and you believe some non-true things. Obviously, it's not a binary thing. So if you're on the fence, if you're wishy-washy, you're at number 3 when you came down from number 4. So number 4, remember we jump right to this stage from number 1. You have right belief and right knowledge, but you don't have right conduct. Okay, you're not capable of taking vows. Remember that vows are what separates humans from all the other beings in the world. Animals cannot perform vows. Even heavenly and hellish beings cannot perform vows. You are in a unique position being a human, and you should take advantage of it by making vows and sticking to them. By making vows and sticking to them, you are performing nirjara, which of course is burning the karma that's currently bound to your soul. So here in number 4, you cannot take any vows. You can't take any vows because of your karma. Specifically, you have faith-deluding karma, and you have mityatva, which is the barrier on conduct. It's a type of Monia karma. So that's the 4th stage. The 5th stage is partial renunciation. That is, you adopt the minor vows. The minor vows are non-lying, non-stealing, non-attachment, non-violence, that should have been the first one, and certain forms of celibacy, right? So you adopt the 5 vows and you're at the 5th stage. Due to a partial manifestation of the deluding karma, you're not able to completely renounce the world, which is the next stage. So if you're a Shravak who has, which is a layman, if you're a Shravak who has taken the 5 vows and you are able to perform the right conduct, you're at this stage. So questions or comments on the first 5 stages, or if anything was confusing about that, we can clear that up. So for us, we would probably be at stage 5, stage 4, or stage 3 or 2. We would probably not be at stage 1 right now. So for everybody here, all of us, we would probably be somewhere between 2 and 5.
Timur, I have a question.
Yes.
Regarding, so you said from 1 you can jump to 4.
Right.
But from 4, you cannot, I missed the part where 2 or 3 you cannot go to 4 or something like that. You have to come back to 1. Or...
Right. So if you're at 1 and you go up to 4. Okay, it's confusing because we put numbers on these and we think of numbers in order. Okay, but it's not numbers. If it helps you talk about A to D or whatever, but we're just going to stick with numbers. So when you go 1 and you go up a stage, you go to 4. Then, and if you get more monia karma, you go down to 3, and then you can only go down one way to 2, and then you can only go down one way to number 1. And then you have to go back up to number 4. So for number 1 is one way only to number 4. Number 4 is 2 ways, up to number 5 or down to number 3. Number 3 is one way down to number 2. Number 2 is one way down to number 1. A little bit confusing. It'll get more confusing as we go. So don't worry.
So it says stage 5 is the highest stage that a layperson can attain.
Right.
And that's like all of us?
That's all of us because we have not renounced the world.
And why would renouncing the world make us not a layperson? Or
yes, that would make you on the path to being a sadhu.
Okay.
And we call that taking diksha, right? When you renounce the world and you are solely interested in your spiritual development. Okay, so number 6. So we've renounced the world, and now instead of the 5 minor vows, we've taken the 5 major vows. That is, they're the same, except they're much more, the restrictions are much more. They're the same vows, but the manner in which you observe them is more strict. In stage 6, we ensure complete self-control by adopting all the major vows prescribed for a sadhu for purity of conduct. The important feature of this stage is a completely disciplined life by the adoption of all the 5 major vows. This means complete dedication to the practice of the 3 jewels: right faith, right knowledge, and right conduct. If we're at 6, we can go up to 7, we can go down to 5, or we can skip 5 on the way down and we can go right down to 4. Okay, number 7. Number 6 was full renunciation with less awareness. So as soon as we renounce the world, we're on number 6. And number 7 is renunciation with awareness. So here we're going to be sadhus who's adopted all the vows, but also we have enough self-control. The only thing we don't control are minor acts of negligence. So here's an important fork in the road in our story of our soul at stage 7. Now, from stages 8 through 14, there are 2 ladders, okay? There's the suppression ladder and there's the annihilation ladder. And what that means is we can start suppressing our karma or we can start getting rid of our karma completely. And we'll still progress on the same numbers, 8, 9, 10, like that, except we'll be on different ladders. We'll be on the suppression ladder or the annihilation ladder on 8. And so when we're on 9, we'll be on the suppression ladder of 9 or the annihilation ladder of 9. So at 7 is a fork in the road. So when you go down from 7, you only go down to 6, and you go up to 8, but you go up to 8 on one of the 2 ladders, okay? So number 8, the meditative state, also known as the unprecedented stage. This stage takes the soul, will be on the verge of enlightenment when we reach this stage. We continue purification on our soul based on one of the 2 ladders. Either we suppress our karmas or we annihilate our karmas. And the important feature of this stage is the high degree of suppression or destruction of karma with the consequent purity of the soul. So at each stage of the ladder, we're purifying our soul, and at this stage is one of the highest degrees of purity of the soul. So then we'll go up to stage 10, the stage of subtle greed. So there are still traces of Monia karma on our soul while we're on stage 10, and the minutest degree of subtle greed. Remember, our passions are eliminated in order: anger, ego, deceit, greed. And that's the order of easiest to hardest to eliminate. It's easiest to eliminate anger, it's hardest to eliminate greed. So here we only have a tiny bit of greed left, and we've conquered all of our other passions. This is the stage where action and passions are still present, but as we talked about, the passions are very little. So from this stage on, we're going to stop doing actions. That is, we've gotten rid of most of our passions. Now our soul is going to do less and less actions because we want to attract less and less karma to our soul. So questions on that? Questions on any of the stages we've talked about so far, because the next one is very important. Stage 11.
Timur, can you share a little bit about the letters, like the suppression letter and annihilation letter?
That's coming up on stage 11.
Okay, I'll wait.
So, we've talked in this class about the power of stories. And I've told you that the story of your soul is the most interesting story ever told. It's got ups and downs, and it's got twists and turns. And this is going at stage 11. Well, here's the final climax, the biggest twist of the greatest story ever told. That is, if you chose the suppression ladder, here at stage 11, this is the highest you'll ever go. Because what's going to happen is you've been suppressing and suppressing your karma because that was the easier path. And what happens is, as soon as that suppression stops, because you can't keep it up forever, that karma manifests again in your soul, and your soul sinks back to the lower stages. If you chose this ladder, you're never going to get past 11. In fact, you could sink to any of the stages directly, right from 11, and you could go all the way back to 1, because you chose the wrong path. You chose the suppression path rather than the annihilation path, because it was easier. That's the main characteristic of this stage. If you chose the annihilation path, you get to advance to stage 12, which is the passionless stage. Okay, so finally, we got rid of all of our passions, including the subtle greed remnants. The main characteristic of this stage is the highest purity of meditation. You have the best meditation you can have. And your soul also destroys these 4 types of karma: the Nanavarniya karma, Darshanavarniya karma, and Antaraya karma. That is, you start actively getting rid of entire types of karma at this stage. And we're finally passionless. So this is how long it takes to get rid of all of our passions. The next stage, all the passions are destroyed, and since your Nanavarniya karma is destroyed, you are a Kevali, which means you're an omniscient. You have instead of right faith, right knowledge, and right action, you have perfect faith, perfect knowledge, and perfect action. The only karma that remains are the 4 agati karmas. Remember, we have 8 karmas. We've gotten rid of 4. The 4 that remain are the agati karmas that keep the soul embodied. You also, for the agati karma, you're only worried about nirjara. You're not worried about samvara anymore. Any karma, agati karma that you attract, they don't bind to your soul. So there's no bandh because you're at this stage. So the only worries you have from here on out are destroying the 4 agati karmas and only nirjara. And finally, stage 14, we were actively omniscient, we were a Kevali, we've gotten rid of all of our karma, and then we are liberated. And this is the goal. This is what we've been talking about. This is what we try to achieve. This is what we spend all of our efforts trying to achieve. Stage 14, even action stops. So before previous stages, couple stages ago, we got rid of all of our passions, but we were still doing things, right? We were still breathing, we were still eating, we were still doing, even all of our actions stop. We become completely still. And then for a moment, all of our passions and action stops. And the book says for a moment, that is the time it takes to pronounce 5 vowels, you have no passions, no actions, you're still alive, but after those 5 moments, you die and you become liberated. The body attains, the soul leaves the body and attains liberation, free from further births and deaths in the world. In this stage, you have the highest type of meditation known as Shukla Dhyan, in which the types of subtle as well as gross physical, vocal, and mental activities stop. So no passions and no actions at this stage. So we've given you a brief overview about the 14 stages of spiritual development. We're all at different stages. None of us are past 5. Questions or comments? Okay, so we can categorize these 14 stages. The first 3 stages you can think about, all your soul is worried about is external activities. The soul is so-called extrovert. From the 4th to the 12th stages, your soul is a so-called introvert. You're only concerned with your own welfare. You're not worried about the activities of others or doing any external activities. All your life is focused on the internal. And the last 2 stages are, of course, different, and those are called Godhood stages or Paramatma stages, where you're a perfect soul in the last 2. Okay, so it's important to know about Monia karma or deluding karma. That is the battle we're up against in most of these stages. That's why it's called the king of all karma, because it will force you to do things that attract all the other 7 types of karma. So that's what we're up against. And so at each stage, what we're eliminating are these items: Mithyatva, Avirati, Pramada, Kashaya, and Yoga. So in case you don't know, these are... Mithyatva is false faith. That's what we start eliminating. That's how we start on the path. Next, we start eliminating avirati, which is indiscipline. So remember, as we take on vows, we take on discipline. So remember, these are our enemies. Pramada is negligence. Remember, towards the middle of the stages, our soul has gotten rid of all of the passions except for perhaps negligent items. One of the last things we get rid of is passion or kashayas, which we've been talking about for years. And the very last thing we get rid of is yoga or activities. So these are our enemies on our 14 stages of spiritual development: false faith, indiscipline, negligence, passion, and finally actions. As we get further and further along each stage of development, our enemies change. And so what you might think of is, wow, I know what I thought of was, well, there are 14 stages and I'm on stage 3 or 4 or 5. I have a long way to go. Yes, we do have a long way to go, and we have many obstacles to overcome, which is why we should cherish being born as a human and being able to understand these obstacles. And we should remember that life is a very brief opportunity for nirjara. Animals can't perform nirjara, heavenly beings and hellish beings can't perform nirjara, only we can. So we should use the limited time we have, that's so very precious, to perform as much nirjara as possible, because we're far behind and there is a long way to go and many enemies to fight. But don't let it get you down. Don't let Don't let it distract you from your goals. Just the fact that we can perceive the amount of this fight. Think back, just like we might have felt bad because we go watch football instead of meditating. I told you at the beginning, don't feel bad because you're here now. And that means you're further along than somebody else. Well, we're here now. We're at 3, 4, 5. And guess what? Most people, most animals, most heavenly and hellish beings are at 1 and 2. That is, it's so crazy that you're at 3, 4, or 5. The book says that it is like you're a piece of straw. It's like your soul is a piece of straw or a piece of paper that has been ejected from the clutches of a whirlpool. That's how you found yourself here. Most people, most souls are at 1 and 2. That is, we are very lucky to be at 3, 4, or 5. So don't feel bad about being at, let's say, 5 out of 14. You're actually not less than halfway there when you compare yourself to other souls.
There are non-Jains, people who practice other religions, at the highest levels there. In this structure and model, would they be at stage 1, wrong faith, or would they be somewhere further along?
It depends, because you can be a member of another religion and still have somewhat right faith. It's just harder for you to act on it. So let's say you're a Buddhist, right? And you believe in nonviolence, and you believe in non-lying and non-stealing and all that, and you take vows for that. Well, you're not at stage 1, okay? Because remember, it's not, wrong faith is not calling yourself Jain, okay? Wrong faith is not believing in the Jain principles, no matter what you call them or how you understand them. So the answer to your question is yes and no, because there are some people of other religions that have the wrong faith, and they're at stage 1. And there are some people of other religions that have the right faith. They don't call themselves Jain, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about belief in the Jain principles. Now let's say we take our example, that person that calls themselves a Buddhist and believes in Buddhist principles, they can only go so far as those Buddhist principles align themselves with Jain principles. Once that stops, their spiritual development stops, because they don't believe in the truth.
Hey, Tim, kind of having a hard time accepting that, the principle of one of the principles of Jainism is anikantvad,
Yes.
non-absolutism. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is, if it is not aligned with Jain principles, your faith is not going to lead you to liberation. I mean, that's absolutism, isn't it?
No. What you're describing, your underlying arguments, is that anikantvad means that there's no truth. That there's no truth and no falsity. But that's not true. There is truth and there is falsity. The reason the purpose of anikantvad is to show that as long as you believe in the truth, it doesn't matter how you got there. In fact, there are liberated souls that are in moksha right now that have never heard of Jainism. Okay? They just practiced Jainism, not having heard of the word. They just believed in those truths that Jainism espoused and then became liberated. So no, it's not true that anikantvad means that there's no truth and no falsity.
Tim, one thing I notice is as you group the different gunastanak in the groups with extrovert and introvert. So it's a journey. If I think of it from a kind of helicopter view, it's an extrovert to introvert. So from external world to internal world is a journey. Whereas what we try to do, if I've been told you always want to be an extrovert in real life, so it's kind of seem a conflict for your I guess social life, professional life journey versus spiritual life journey, and how can you maintain two different and I know it's part of it being in the destroying the Moniya karma, but it's just when we live our regular life, you almost have a conflict there.
Right. So it's true, a lot of the advice you get is to be extroverted. To get ahead in your job, you have to network. To get ahead and to know the right people, you have to be interested in their lives and converse with them. And once they know you, you become acquaintances and then friends, and then you do favors for each other, and then you get ahead, you both get ahead, and it's a win-win situation. But you're not winning as far as spiritual development. When you immerse yourself into the lives of others, you're not winning. When you immerse yourself into material gain and getting ahead at your job and doing all that, you're not winning. And I don't care about your job, Mihir. I don't care about the fact that you are climbing the social ladder. I care about your soul, and I care about how far your soul is getting. So it's not true that you're getting ahead by being an extrovert, because what you call getting ahead is not actually getting ahead.
Yeah, I think less in terms of extrovert introvert is, people I think confuse it with being social or more social or less social, instead of where you draw your energy from.
Right.
Does it give you energy or drink? But these 14 I think of more from a unconscious to a conscious and back to an unconscious state. And there's a thing, like if you want to break a habit, let's say when you give a presentation, you say and ah, right? Those filler words a lot, right? And it starts off with this unconscious incompetence, right? You don't know that you're doing something wrong. And then someone points out, hey, Shatu, you're saying and ah a lot in your presentation. Now you're in conscious incompetence. Now I know that I'm doing something that I want to change. Then I work to change it, and it becomes conscious competence, right? And I think that's the active suppression that we were talking about earlier. So I'm actively working on reducing those filler words until it becomes my new normal, my new habit, and I'm unconsciously competent, right? Which I think is the 14th stage here, where it's inactive. It's just becoming a part of me to do the right conduct and the right behavior that I'm going after.
So let's take a look at some good quotes from the book. Thus, a constant struggle is going on between the forces of darkness of wrong belief, mithyatva, which try to keep the soul tied down to the samsara, or worldly existence, on the one hand, and forces of light of true belief, or samyaktva, which try for liberation in the other. In the long run, there comes a chance when, by reducing its karma load, the forces of light prevail and the soul is able to break the shackles of mithyatva, just like a piece of straw or paper is able to escape out of a whirlpool. Once that happens, the soul is set on the road of rising gunasthanaks. In other words, the pilgrim has found his path, and the pilgrim's progress has begun, which may ultimately lead to the liberation of the soul, though it may take millenniums and millenniums. And that's what we're looking at here. We are looking at, in our brief opportunity to be human, we are looking, even if we don't, let's say we never get past 5, We never renounce the world. We can still perform Nirdra, and we will reduce the number of our rebirths by millenniums. In this one life, you can reduce the amount of pain that your soul will go through by millenniums. So take this opportunity to do it. Even if you never renounce the world and become a sadhu and take diksha, you still have the opportunity to reduce the amount of pain in the story of your soul by a lot. The book goes on to state, karma may appear as the immediate cause determining the gunasthaniks. That is, it may appear to be that as we get rid of more karma, we advance on the stages. But since karma in turn accrue, arise, or subside by these things, Yog, Kashaya, Pramada, Avidati, and Mithyatva, as seen earlier, these are ultimately responsible for your soul's progress or downfall. Any questions or comments on that? That is, we're very lucky that perhaps it was a chance that ejected us from the whirlpool of Mithyatva. But now that we're ejected, we have an opportunity to advance along these spiritual paths and an opportunity to reduce the amount of pain that our future selves will experience. Well, that's all I have for you this week. Thank you very much for attending class. I don't take it for granted that we have such a good group here. I'm very interested in the spiritual progress of each and every one of you. And I just wanted to thank you for showing up each week and working on our souls together. I know sometimes it's the extremely hardest thing is to open this textbook during the middle of the week. And it's great because the kids are in Patsala, so we get to come to this class. But really try to make one time outside of this week to work on your spiritual development. It doesn't have to be an hour a day like we're talking about. It could be just on Monday on the ride back home from work. Just start a habit like that. Or start maybe on Wednesday. Wednesday's usually slow for you, maybe. Wednesday after dinner. Just use a little bit of that time to work on your spiritual self. And I think that we'll make a lot of progress together. Thank you, everybody, for your time this week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.